Hey everyone, it's Living Dead, and I'm coming back with another WOD playthrough. This time we're going to do something just a little bit different. I'm going to be giving a sort of debrief to a WOD that I made. So we'll be looking at a commentary and a critique of the second map that I ever published, or made, in fact. It's called STYGIAN Anguish, and it's actually map 2. Because this was intended to be a part of a larger project, which I think basically everybody who starts making maps in Doom has the idea to do. And, of course, like very much like those, it didn't really pan out. I'm not really interested in making a project out of this map anymore. So this is what you see is what you get. This is a standalone map as far as I'm concerned. And I'd like to take you on a walkthrough of this level, give it my earnest shot at playing, although I will be quick saving because I can beat it on ultraviolence, but it's a pain in the ass and I don't really want to start it over. But I will be pointing out some lessons that I learned along the way. I will be critiquing the map, hopefully as honestly as I can, and offering a little bit of insight into the development philosophy of it. So with that being said, let's get to the action here. We start out in an elevator shaft, and to get started we hit this button. And as you'll see, so yeah, I kind of had a little dual stage kind of script there. Well, I'll explain the scripting in this map in a minute. But to lower the elevator and then to lower the gate once the elevator got to the bottom, which requires a little bit of sophistication. Not too bad, but... So as you can see, popping out of the elevator, the two pinkies kind of immediately see you and force your hand, which is to kill the shotgunner and take his weapon and immediately start fighting things that are perched up on these ledges and trying to kill you. If you attempt to jump down into the pit here, there's a couple of specters that roam around and can catch you off guard or block you in, along with some pinkies. But the ultimate goal in this area is the player cannot escape. So you're immediately thrust into this like tight warehouse looking area with a lot of hostility around you, and you have an immediate goal of trying to figure out how to actually get out of here. And I feel like ultimately I like the way that this opened up for the most part. It is intended to be pretty hard. This is not a map that I really had any qualms about making not easy. We'll get into the difficulty in a little bit, because I'm not really that satisfied with how it turned out. But, you know, it is what it is. So, anyways, the first thing that you have to do is you actually have to visit both sides of this here. And it's really, in retrospect, I don't think there's necessarily a good reason for that. I think I just wanted to force the player to have to go up both of these elevators and clear out these areas. Like, they cannot skip any of this stuff. And I don't know if I'm really a fan of that in retrospect, but whatever. So you hit this switch here. This one opens, or see, there's a bridge on the other side of the platform, or on the outside, that switch opens, or raises. And then on this side, which I should have hit it while I was up here, this switch opens the door. And that was a mistake in design, and I will explain to that in a very quick second. The way that this area is set up will make it hard for me to just show you and tell you exactly what I mean. But, so as you finally escape from this area, hopefully without having burned too many resources, the player's immediately set upon by another sort of onslaught. And you'll quickly find, if you play this map, that you don't have much of a flexibility in staying out here. This area is way too dangerous, so you're forced ostensibly to run across the bridge. But unfortunately, when you get to the end, you trigger... Whoops. See, I didn't want to pick that up, and that was kind of a mistake. You trigger not only this Revenant spawn, but a Caco Cloud to show up behind you and really force you down here. And finally, you get some hardware to fight back, but, you know, the Super Shotgun's probably not the ideal weapon to have in this scenario. You might want, like, the rocket launcher or something to deal with all this. So, my intent behind this was, and going back to the dual switch thing, one of the switch opens the door, and one of the switches raises the bridge. And Sorry, this map is tough, and it's hard to talk and fight at the same time. What I should have done was just make this... If I wanted to keep the 2 switches, then I would dual stage the switch by like having either... If I was using boom compatibility, I would have some voodoo dolls where pressing both of the switches requires... Or you have to press both of the switches before just the door opens. It doesn't do 2 different things as far as the player is concerned. It just... Both of them have to be switched to raise the door. Instead, it raises the door and it also raises the bridge. And the problem is that people would often, in the videos I saw, open only the door and then not the bridge. And then they jump down into the poison and then they would just run around and not figure out how to get back up. And you can get back up, but I did not signpost the elevators basically at all. So, if you can't already guess, this is a map with a fairly frustrating opening. What I really wanted to do was make it a sort of high stakes, very intense, just deluge of enemy fire that forces you to come out here, do what you can to scoop up supplies, but then pretty much immediately run across the bridge and just get to cover as quickly as possible. So it is absolutely meant to just push the player out into this area and out of their comfort zone. But again, combining that with the fact that the bridge, may not be raised, or if you look, you can very clearly see that it's easy to sort of fall off the bridge and into the poison. It's just kind of a pain in the ass. I don't think it's the good kind of fun necessarily. It would be probably better to do one or the other. But but as you can see, it's not too terribly defeated by just once you get the super shotgun. Oh my god. Well, I might be eating my words. Wow. That was luck if I ever saw it. It can be pretty easily defeated by just holding onto the super shotgun and killing the Caco Cloud. And then they can't really pressure you. And then you can kind of just chip away at a lot of stuff. These Mancubuses, or Mancubi, I guess, are intentionally difficult to deal with. And then if the player tries to go in here, there is this that you have to deal with, so... But then the player will come in here and they will realize, okay, so the blue key is needed. So, gives you a little bit of the first hints of what the progression will be for seeing the first locked door. Of course, coming back into here, and another thing, this is something that people just don't really realize because they're under too much pressure, and so they cannot read the signposting of the map. The red key is needed to go across this bridge, and the blue key is needed to go across this bridge. Fucking dick. Oh wow, it's been a while since I saved, isn't it? Okay, well, that's not a big deal, because I'm just spending most of this time talking so far. So let's just get through this. Let's just get going a little bit. So come up here, kill these guys. Probably wake this dude up. Oh man. And then this is like, the first real pitched battle that I really intended the player to have a huge chance at fighting back against. This, the previous encounters were really just intended to kind of mostly force you up to this area in the first place. And the reasons that I wanted to do that at all was I had, probably a couple weeks before I even began this map, I started playing through Valiant again, and I got up to that map, Bushwhacked, that uses the song Astral Dreadnought by Jimmy, and I just kind of became really obsessed with the concept of it for some reason, and I wanted to make something that didn't copy that map necessarily, but made me feel like that map felt while I was playing it. Now, you can see if you were familiar with that map, it basically is, a lot of different sort of segmented larger arenas that have the common theme of like this precarious type of walkway. So it's, lots of chasms to fall into, and over the course of the map, you're either going up and down in elevation, or you are dealing with really intense setups like Mancubuses perched all over the area while you have to try to like run across very narrow chasms, and it's, it's tricky. It requires some good footwork and some patience and some luck. And I really enjoyed that. So I wanted to make a map that at least reminded me of that at the outset, and that was kind of my attempt to do that. Now, one thing that everybody probably realizes if you've played a lot of Doom is that Skillsaw is really good at balancing anything that he sets up for the most part, and so his version of that is a lot more fun than I think my version of that. So yes, as you can see here, once the player hits the switch in that other room, you spawn a nice little imp span teleportation trap that I just, you know, who doesn't love just blowing away imps with the super shotgun? All right. So, I don't know if it's obvious to people who are watching who play a lot of Doom, but if you couldn't guess, a lot of these setups are sort of done so under the premise or the assumption that the player is going to like come into the area and engage like directly with just the content of the area and not really try to like backtrack or, you know, funnel enemies or anything else to that nature. And so it sort of breaks down a little bit. Like, if you stand your ground, grab the super shotgun, you can kill all the cacodemons with impunity for the most part. There's not really much threat against anything. They don't bother you for the rest of the map. Come in here, you know, kind of chip away at some of this stuff. And then, you know, when I would play test this map, I wouldn't necessarily kill the cacodemons, and they would come in here and they would start to kind of clog things up even worse. And so it was just like, you know, this really fun nonsense. But the way that I just did it demonstrated a very easy way to kind of defeat that two-stage sort of thing. And I think what you kind of learn from that is Doom doesn't really, you know, I don't really like a lot of arena areas in Doom that lock you in constantly. It reminds me too much of Doom 2016, and that was things about that game that I did not really like that much, was everything is an arena. Full stop. So it starts to just feel too gamey after a while, whereas what is so much fun about original Doom is there's a lot of just exploration and this kind of organic feeling of killing things in an area as you're going through it, that's lost in that modern version of the game. And I really built this map with that kind of thought in mind, but, you know, as classic Doom tends to point out, it's very easy to... You move between areas, you can keep things from playing out the way that they do, and, you know, so as an author, you have to keep that in mind, that it's, the player is going to do what they want to do, and they don't really care about the premise of your map if it means they can win. So... if you can see this is a pretty nasty pinky trap here, or their specter trap, where if players run from that previous fight after opening the door, they fall into this crazy little trap. And I thought it was easier than it was when I play tested it, but it's nasty. It's not very forgiving at all. So this is another kind of two-stage thing where you have to... The reason you have to open that little door first is to open the door that locks you in here, and then the second thing lowers the platform, or raises the platform back up so that it can be used as an elevator again. And, you know, so I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but I actually made this map in UDMF format, so I could have totally used scripting to do any of those things that I've demonstrated so far, but I didn't, because I didn't really want to learn how to do it. So... these are actually Boom-style scripts, except it doesn't use voodoo dolls. I just basically placed... I'm pretty sure I placed health bonuses on little script closets outside of the map that cross line defs and work exactly the way that voodoo dolls do. Except it uses the, like, when thing crosses the line def action, I believe. So, kind of stupid. But I just thought the idea of doing it that way was kind of fun, and also I didn't really want to learn how to actually script, so... We'll see, this map really kind of opened my eyes to the possibility of doing scripting, so there's a lot of experimentation with that in this map. So, as we've kind of come back through here, the player's kind of beginning the first... a real completion of like a circuit type of segment. And this map, really what I had intended is it's a series of circuit types of segments that bring you back to the central area. So once the player kind of ventures through the imp spam trap, you kind of come down here. I did want to sort of prevent the player from backtracking just to kind of keep, to make sure that the pace going forward continues the way that it should. So the player comes through here, you know, because ultimately I don't really want the player to miss the blue key here. So I made it really obvious to see for multiple vantage points. That's why it's up so high on the pedestal. It can be seen, you know, you can tell there's a lot of different areas in the map that could probably see this key here. And then, you know, now the player's kind of got the only option to go forward this way, and you can see now that you're returning to previously explored areas, but in new context. So, you know, what I really like is that sort of dramatic aspect of the map where the actual layout of the map is the drama. It's always fun to me as a player to anticipate how the map is going to work, how it will connect back to itself, especially when it shows me that that will happen. So, you know, having the arachnotrons up here, if the player notices them, they are really, you know, shellacking you with plasma down there. But you're going to know that, you know, hope maybe this is an area I can get up to. And then when you finally do connect back and you see, like, oh, that's the starting area, I can actually see what this area looks like a little bit more now that it's not as dangerous to me, because I'm in a much better spot. I've killed some of these enemies up here, and finally have a chance to actually, like, understand what's going on in the map in a way. Like, I didn't really want the player to completely understand the map until they come back up through here. I wanted the high pressure to really, like, make you think, like, ah, damn, I didn't have enough time to see what was going on in that place. I'll have to try to figure that out later. And in that regard, I think, you know, I succeeded in the map, but I think I implemented it in a way, like, the execution, I think, ends up being a little bit frustrating. So, okay, so coming back through here, so you know, once you have the blue key, you can see back down into this area. I really didn't want to keep the fence up, but I did want to give the player the option of jumping down, but, you know, with the hopes that they don't miss this blue door, because this blue door is actually pretty, it's not necessarily completely required for progression, but you will miss the rocket launcher if you don't go in here. So, and as far as I could see from the playtest that I was able to watch, people didn't really miss this door, so that was good. So, you know, here's a pretty obvious trap. I don't think it's that big of a deal that it's too obvious, but yeah, you know, it's just a quick thing to keep you on your toes, give you a little bit of fodder to shoot through with a super shotgun, which is always fun. So this setup in this area is really interesting. This kind of comes back to, you know, I want the player to do something very specific, and in this case, I think it was something specific that's not very natural to Doom, which is I don't want the player to trigger something until it's time for them to trigger it. And because I want the player to see something, and I want the encounter to play out in a very precise way. And I think, as you'll see here in a second, this is kind of the wrong thing to have done. So what happens is, I don't want the player to go beyond this doorway, which, you know, would naturally happen when you open these traps and the pinkies flood out. So to prevent that from happening, as soon as a player comes into this room and triggers the line def that opens this closet, they also trigger a line def that locks the door behind you. So, oh wait, never mind. Okay, scratch that. I was pretty sure that this implementation of the trap did that, but I guess it does not. But it does prevent you from going forward through here. So you have to come in here and hit this switch. And you can probably see how, like, that's kind of confusing, because, like, you come to this door, it doesn't open, you probably don't notice the switch. There's, like, a good likelihood that you don't notice the switch. And you just come back out here and you're like, okay, I guess I'll jump down instead. And that, as we'll see in a second, like, it completely disconnects everything in a bad way. So the reason why I wanted the player to come through here is because this cool little thing happens. Ooh, spooky. Neat little trap. But guess what? Nobody looked at that, literally at all. In a single one of my playtests, I'm pretty sure not a single player noticed that at all. So it just goes to show that when you make a Doom map, you have to embrace the randomness. And it's not just Doom's wonky RNG, and it's not just the way that monsters behave somewhat randomly sometimes. You know, and I won't say that, because monsters are very predictable in Doom, but hopefully this makes a little sense. But, you know, it's not just that. It's also the player's actions, the way that players are going to interpret things with your map, the way that players will care about the things in your map, and all of that, for the most part, those are things that are always going to be fairly random. So if you need something to happen that kind of violates that intrinsic randomness, I think you'll find in the map making process, you do a lot of work to accomplish very little. And you should instead, you know, kind of embrace the doomness. Now, there's probably really good ways to have made that trap work. Like, if I wanted the player to actually see that, I think you can still get away with it. But you have to make that, like, literally the only thing that they can pay attention to. So, like, you know, maybe if this was supposed to be more of a set piece, right? You think of, like, almost the classic, like, the player is tricked into jumping down into an arena type of thing, where, like, the experiment is unleashed upon them, and it's like, haha, now you will finally see the fruits of our evil labors. It's this monster we've been creating, and now you will die. You know, so the player drops down into the pit, and then they see that happen. It's you know, an irrefutable certainty that will, you know, be observed by most of the players. But instead, the way that I set the arena up, I didn't really think about this idea until after I had almost completely designed this room. And by that point, you know, it's for the most part, it just didn't really work out. It was cool, but it didn't pay off. And there's something to be said about how player expectation and player experience plays a whole lot into what you decide to do in the map. So, in the map making process. So the player cannot miss the rocket launcher in the linear intended path, because you have to hit the switch to open the bars and then come back this way. Although I guess you could say, like, it is slightly possible, but it's highly unlikely that the player will miss the trap or the rocket launcher. So, but again, if you kind of built the mental map, you realize coming back this way, so the player can open the blue door, but then the blue door is these bars were here if you come from this direction. So it's completely pointless. It only serves to keep the player, or to allow the player to go in a sort of one-way track out this way. But then in that case, you don't even need the blue door. So, you know, it's just kind of a little bit of a stupid design. So, anyways, one thing we'll do here real quick is I will jump down and get the chainsaw, because nobody picked that up. The other thing I will do is reveal one of the secrets, because nobody noticed that in any of the playthroughs I saw. Jumping down this way. So while the player is punished, and here is one of the secrets. I didn't realize you could pick the Berserk pack up before you even walk into the room. So the player is, you know, punished for jumping down this way. But it is possible to get out of here. It's also possible to just go in this... Oh, it is not. See? This may be a version of the map that I didn't actually publish. I don't remember. But, yeah. You probably tell that the teleporter was something that, like, was introduced late into the map's iteration. Originally, like, the only way to get back up out of the poison was to use these elevators on the end of this platform, but basically nobody noticed it, so everybody was like, just put teleporters in some of the initial feedback, and I'm pretty sure I started doing that, and then maybe I never finished it because I just moved on from this map. I don't remember. But, yeah, so, okay. So now we are across the first branch, or the second branch of the bridge, and blue key activates the bridge here. Players will always figure that out, so that's at least a good thing, that doesn't take too long for them to get beyond that. And, you know, hopefully anybody who at least caught a quick glimpse of stuff, you know, would realize as they come into this central hub area that, you know, this is going to be an area that you return to open up the new pass. And I think this is a cool concept. Like, I really like the way that this map ends up looking in terms of the visuals and the layout of it and the theme of it. I'm very pleased with how that turned out. It's just the way that I implemented the actual gameplay concept, I think, is frustrating in many, many, many ways. And that's not to say people did not like this map, but I think the type of feedback that I got, and then retrospect, you know, I played this map a couple of weeks ago just for one random reason or another, and it just kind of pissed me off. This map was certainly a lesson to me in how trying to do too much and trying to do things in a very specific way just ultimately ends up frustrating people. So, coming into the major blue key area, this is my attempt at a larger, open, and kind of contiguous series of separate kind of encounters. So, you know, you kind of have this area up here. This area that I just woke up over to the right is kind of like the main sort of melee, if you will. There's a lot of monsters that infight, which I'm totally cool with. Chain gunners that sort of pester you. And so, you know, where the player is probably going to think to go is, this is a little too dangerous. I don't have the hardware for it. So they might try to travel this way instead. Oh, man. I cannot believe that. So they try to go this way instead. And as we'll see in a moment, we'll realize that there is some much needed hardware to acquire. This is just such a pain in the ass. Like, I think I keep bringing it back up, but you know, when I designed the map, I did want things to be tough and challenging, and you have to dissect it. But I think that it kind of turned out to, like, it's just kind of a pain in the ass to kill a lot of the monsters in this map. Like, setting up 3 revenants up here, and just all these, like, high-powered monsters with, like, lots of hit points, it just starts to feel like a slog. So yes, here's the much-needed hardware, but with an accompanying, I think, an appropriately accompanying trap of the Archvile showing up, and in a pretty dangerous way. We'll come back and dissect this in just a moment, if it's safe to do so. But as you can see, we're starting to run a little bit low on certain ammo that I need, and there is still plenty of bad guys to kill. So as we come back up here, let's take a look at this. So, you know, I hope that the player would come in here and see this. Again, I think to some degree there's a lot going on, and it's very easy for players to just kind of miss something like this here and not realize that they're about to get the plasma gun at all. So you come into the platform, you grab the plasma gun, it drops you down into this area, which I like the setup of this. I actually think this trap is, for the most part, exactly what I wanted to make. Archvile spawns. This is a bad spot to be with an Archvile, so he kind of forces you back out here, and hopefully, you know, you can kind of turn around and deal with them. So ooh. And so yeah, as you can see, somebody who just tries to mindlessly press forward is going to essentially just wake up a whole bunch of nonsense, and this area just becomes very difficult. But that's fine. I really did want this to be a very, you know, kind of continuous kind of area where combat can play out in a lot of ways. And I think this actually, I think the flow of the arena and most of the setup is what I wanted out of this, but I think this area could do with a lot more ammunition. And you'll see as we get through it exactly how that begins to play out. I think it's easy to take for granted that 41 shells looks like a big number, but it's really only 12 shots. And when you look at the number of monsters in this area, I mean, Arachnotron, Revenants, Mancubus, Chain Gunners. So there's at least, you know, 3 or 4 sets of monsters that require anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 shots each. That's basically all the ammunition right there. And there's still plenty of stuff to kill. I do like the idea that the player has to kind of switch between weapons. But this area is about to fill back up with more monsters. And if you make mistakes, oops, like that, you're in a lot of trouble. So oh boy, not doing so good. Why am I dying on my own map? Oh, fortuitous. Yeah, trying to get a Mancubus up here, like, such a dickish setup. You can kind of come out here a little bit. But it's still pretty hard to see. Alright. Alright, finally make it up to the top of this area here. All right. So, yeah, as you can see, this is this is not the easiest map or area to just kind of hang out in and make for good commentary to sort of dissect it. So I thought it best to just kind of clear things up a little bit before I try to get too much further into any commentary. That being said, I really like the way that this arena kind of played out. I actually like the design of it a lot. I like the flow of it for the most part. I think the setup, and I mean, if I was to do it again, I think I would just kind of tweak the setup in general. But for the most part, I think it's a very dynamic type of area with a lot of different monsters, and it's very possible to move through this place and dissect this battle in many different ways. I tend to prefer, a good degree of kiting monsters into areas and then kind of running back, so using Doomguy's speed, using this areas for cover and to line monsters up in preferable ways and just kind of deal with them, and then, begin to kind of dissect or chop through the stuff to clear the path up through here. But, depending on how you've conserved ammo, there's a lot of different ways you could do that. All right, so here's another secret. Trip this line def. If you're not listening to the music too loudly, you will hear that this opens up. Shoot that, and that reveals this secret here. It's all very quick, and it's easy to miss. And I intended it because this is a pretty powerful secret with the resources that you're given in this map. A cell pack. This may be one of the only cell packs in the map. I think there might be one more. Sorry, just had a sip of beer. Might be one more cell pack, but that's about it. I did want the plasma gun to be a fairly scant but very powerful, when used appropriately, weapon. Having a med kit and a mega armor is a pretty big boon in this map. And I don't know if it's your interpretation, but it certainly is mine, from design intentions, and then also just from playthrough, that it's a very, it's kind of a famine for resources at points. There's a lot of ammo conservation that needs to happen, switching between weapons, and depending on how you play, and just based on my observations of playthroughs, it's very easy for the player to get knocked down to low health, make a couple of mistakes, and then have a very hard time recovering. And I think that's something to be said about intending item placement and resource consideration in a map. Figuring out what your intent is, and if you are willing to allow the player to, or let me think of it another way. You want to consider the ebb and the flow of the player's resources across the level as a whole, and not just in specific arenas. But there are times when you really want the arena to be, encountered from a basis of the player is almost back to full in terms of health and armor even. And that way, you're not having to wonder, well, what's this fight like if they have 30 health? What's this fight like if they have 60 health? What's this fight like if they have 120 health? If you just say, well, okay, the player's going to pick up 2 or 3 med kits before they come into this room or this area, and that's what the basis of this fight is going to be. It really goes into the whole concept of pacing the level. And I don't think that this map very well considered that. There aren't really any situations where I would consider the player just flat out gets replenished completely. I think there might be like one more med kit to pick up in this area. So here's this one. And let's see, there might be a stim pack or two that I missed. But let's just think about this for, this is what I would consider like a set piece map or area of the map. There is multiple stages to this fight, with the archviles coming and replenishing it, which I always love. That's something that I like. I don't think it tends to add too much grindiness or back. It doesn't make the level feel padded, because that's kind of what the archvile is for, as long as it's not excessive. But starting the player up on a different vantage point and dealing with monsters in a completely different way, I love. I mean, how can you not want to try to do multiple things with this space? There's just so many different things going on, and I guess it almost reminds me of like a deathmatch arena in the way that I designed it. But, you know, it's one of those things where once you move on from the set piece, maybe it's not a bad idea to give the player a restock of things. Give some more, you know, I could have given out a few more rockets. I could have given out some cells. I could have given out a couple more med kits, because what happens next? You come in this area, you fight a Baron. You trigger a completely pointless trap. This is one of the stupidest traps I've ever made. It doesn't make any sense. There's no real threat to it at all. There's no reason to have it at all. Because by the time you trigger it, you literally don't trigger that trap until you come up here. So what's even the point in the first place? So, but you know, you can see, like, now we're leaving. Hopefully you realize, like, you picked up the red key. That's an appropriate fight for the red key, I think. Now we're leaving this area. And the player, you know, could... I mean, I'm playing this map, and I know what's going on, and I'm still kind of dying and having trouble with it. Now, part of that's because I'm talking at the same time, but you can now just imagine somebody playing this for the first time. And granted, this is on ultra-violence, but still. And just, like, coming out of that fight with, like, 20 or 30 health, and... What next? Well, we're kind of sort of exiting this sort of sewer outlet area. So we're finally seeing maybe a little bit of the source of where some of this lava, this poison's been coming from. And that was another thing. I really wanted this level to have a fairly abstract look to it, but also to have a kind of story implied in the design of it. So, you know, you kind of have whatever this sort of facility thing is, a lot of this waste, a sewage sort of outlet for this waste area. And it you know, you can kind of see it is sort of one of the sources of this poison that defines the opening area. So, you know, as the player's kind of recouping from this long, drawn-out thing with the red key, I hope that what I conveyed in a couple of these different things is, you know, diverting where you've gone, or, you know, diverting from the main path, being, like, lost for a while, being in kind of a hostile feeling place for a while, and then having a little bit of relief to kind of, like, see where you came from, see that kind of, like, open area, or see that sort of, like, area that hopefully makes you feel a little bit more comfortable again as you kind of come out of it. Although I guess a dank cave is not necessarily an area that makes you feel relieved. So, you know, you come out of it, but I hope the players, you know, at least would... I think a better implementation is if the player has a little bit of resource replenishment here, so you're going into the next thing, you know, on slightly equal footing. Like, you've survived the trial. Why does it need to continue to be a thing? So, I did hide this secret here, but nobody found it in any of the playthroughs that I did. The signpost is the texture is different, but it wasn't picked up in any of the playthroughs that I was able to watch. So, you know, a lot of people came in here with 6, 4, 2 shotgun shells left, maybe some bullets. Probably most people did not have plasma if they didn't find the secret. 3 rockets. And can you just imagine, like, this is just a little irritating. And the player's going into the next area. So finally, we get the red key. Players who watch the monster count will probably realize we're getting close to the end. And I did want this to be a cool little sort of ominous foreshadowing or foreboding kind of appearance. The sort of lights here at the end, and then the waterfall that you walk into. And here we are in this kind of like impossibly black cavern type of area, which I really like the look of this. It is not possible for the player to walk off because I just didn't really want to deal with it. So, but it is, you know, an actual space that they can go into. And so here is another example of sort of the set, or the thing that you can't really rely on, which is that the player will look at something and will observe something. I mean, that's why cutscenes became so popular in game design. Sorry, another sip there. Because it's not possible to count on the player will always see something that they need to see. Now, granted, this is not something that you need to see, but this is something that I worked hard on, and a lot of people didn't watch it. When you hit the red switch, oh, that's scary. And then what you'll notice is the doors begin to open one by one in a cascade, and the lights come on in the chamber as the doors open. So it's not pre-lit, and you know, it was a bit of a tricky little scripting segment to work out, and it was fun. And then I watched one player hit the switch, be completely spooked by the shaking and the red light, and then run back out here and kind of run around here for a while. And then by the time they realized like nothing was going to happen dangerous, they come back in here and they just see this guy and they're like, okay, well, that was weird. Why would that happen? So, you know, it just goes to show you, like, just can't really count on stuff. And to get hung up on that is probably a mistake. You should probably always consider your gameplay over your presentation, I think, especially when you're talking about Doom. Now we sort of move on to the denouement of the level. Another sort of dual stage kind of script thing that I made that nobody watched. The gate opening, but the chains also moving down simultaneously. I thought it looked really cool mechanically, and then I don't think anybody really noticed it. So, oh well. So here we finally move into what the big secret was, and that was kind of what I wanted it to be. When I mentioned at the beginning that this was intended to be part 2 of a WAD series that I was making, the sort of story was classic, you know, infiltrate UAC facility at the top, find the secret elevator that leads into the subterranean area, and then realize that the UAC has been concealing or maybe even protecting us from some sort of hellish infestation in the caverns below. And that was what this was. So that is what this sort of, you know, story-wise, the geometry is meant to convey. The secret behind the waterfall, that's why all the, you know, the bridges are there. It's like, oh, the bridges are there to be convenient to get across. It's like, well, maybe it's also a way to, you know, press the emergency eject button if things get out of hand down here. Drop all the bridges down into the poison and prevent anybody or anything from getting across. So as you can see, so what I kind of did here while I was talking through that, I had the final secret is a switch that is hidden in an inset area out here. It raises the stairs that lead to this mega armor. This is one of the few secrets I've made that is not completely a closet that has the item in it. It's actually kind of a telegraphed secret. You could tell that it's there. You wonder how to get to it. And people actually did find that, but not most people. So, you know, I think this area is a little just kind of irritating. The amount of, I think I had multiple pain elementals the first iteration of it that I ended up deleting. I realized it was just such a pain in the ass. And I did want the player to kind of have this crazy oh shit moment here at the end. It just kind of got some Plutonia level dickishness. There's chain gunners in the little small areas up here, and they're like almost impossible to deal with, especially if you shoot all your rockets. You don't have any plasma. These two revenants up here like shooting down at you, and then of course the fact that an archvile spawns with 2 barons up in front of you while 2 arachnotrons spawn behind you. I like the concept of that because you kind of have to use these to sort of hide, but I think people found it a little bit ridiculous. And then you finally run up here. Of course, you know, your classic hide some nasty enemies in the final room to keep them from just running past and hitting the switch, but I don't think most people had trouble running beyond and hitting this exit switch here, which ends the level. So, I mean, since I've technically beat the level, let's do just a little bit of a... Oop. Of course. Just do a little bit of a final breakdown of things. So, I really like the way that this area looked. Not as pleased with the way that it actually plays. But I really like this kind of infernal castle. The idea of, like, you know, you think of castles as these towering, huge, dwarving structures and that is the case with this one here, except you're at the top of it and the ceiling is really close to your head, and you just wonder like how far below you the cavern goes, is kind of what I was hoping that it would feel like, rather than feeling like you're way high up. It almost kind of has the sort of flip side implication of like, how far down does this go? So, you know, I like the way that it looked a lot. I feared at some points that maybe all the red and the orange would be a little bit hard on people's eyes. Maybe that is the case here, but ultimately I think, you know, I've made really good use of the OTEX texture pack, which I use almost exclusively in this map set, or in this map pack, or this, Jesus, this single map. I think I did a really good job with the design of the area in terms of the visuals, this kind of gothic looking thing, especially a texture set I hadn't really experimented with before I began this map. But, you know, just the area itself is a little bit frustrating. It's not really a lot of room to move around. There's a lot of just annoying enemies. There's, you know, you're trapped in here, so you can't backtrack. And, you know, it just, I think it gets on people's nerves. And that's kind of where I think I would go with just describing this level in general, is just, I think to some degrees, it's just a bit obnoxious. It's one thing to give the player a lot of constraint on resources. It's another thing to do that at the same time you have a lot of like hit scanners in stupid to reach places and constantly springing like revenants and constantly forcing the player with crazy pressure and stuff. And I think it just was too much, and it could have done with a little bit of restraint in some ways. Hack3180 played this map and recorded a video of it on his channel, and I think he rightfully commented on the fact that I kind of just tried to do too much in this map. This was the second map that I made. I really just wanted to come out swinging after the first map. I published it on the Doomworld forums. I liked a lot of the feedback. A lot of the feedback I got made me feel good, and so I was like, okay, well, let me try to do something crazier. So I just had this really ambitious map, and I think I spent like a month on this map. I made the MIDI. So the MIDI you've been listening to, that you're probably tired of hearing by now, is one that I composed all on my own. So you can tell, like, just vast caverns. I made a lot of crazy detail. Probably didn't learn copy and paste until well enough into this map. Try to have crazy scripts, crazy concepts, push the player, staging combat and building up these encounters and all these ridiculous, hopefully not innovative, but, interesting ways. And I think there's just a little too much going on for a second map. What I would impart on people when designing, getting into projects is be okay with not doing too much. This map took a lot to do. It took a lot out of me. I'm still very proud of it. I still think it's a good map. I just think it's not a great map. I think it gets by on the way that it looks, but the gameplay can leave a lot to be desired. The scripting is almost completely useless because it doesn't really amount to much except the amount of time I did it. And I think it's neat from a presentation perspective. I wouldn't take them out, but I would be wiser with my time and with my setups in the future. I think, ultimately it was worthwhile to have made this map for sure. I learned a lot about the process and about myself, and I think I turned out something that was pretty cool, but I think it's cooler than it is good. So that's kind of my assessment of this map. I hope this wasn't too rambly. I hope this is useful for certain people. Before I completely sign off, as I was kind of planning this video, there's one more thing that I did kind of want to get into just briefly, and that was sort of like, what's the genesis for where the map visual came from, and it's part of, I think, a core part of my process. So I just kind of want to articulate it a little bit because I think there are people who might find that interesting, which is like, where does the actual, like, how do you even decide to make this map? And so again, I'll go back to sort of the implied story, or the sort of unofficial story of the setup of my WAD, my multi-level WAD. you know, coming down into the subterranean cavern that is being hidden in, you know, a tightly locked UAC base that's, you know, in a mountain topside somewhere. And I kind of had this sort of key visual of this sort of lonely platform that's kind of the nexus of the level. And I think in my visuals, in my mind's eye, which is really where this kind of began, and my mind's eye with this kind of almost like key visual is sort of where I fixate when I make a level. I just sort of imagine this like really claustrophobic feeling thing, this feeling of being like just hopelessly high. Ooh, there's a missing texture right here. Hopelessly high up. And I think in you know, in my imagination, it like the poison floors, it goes down much further, and you almost have this feeling of like the wind about to knock you off, even though this is a cavern. Something that you might encounter like in Half-Life. And so I just kind of built the level around this idea, and that's kind of how it came about. So, yeah, I guess I don't know. That's a bit of an awkward thing to end on. Now that I think about it in retrospect, to just kind of suddenly go back to that. But what the fuck? I'm already 51 minutes into this video, and I'm not going to start over. So let's go ahead and just call that. That's enough to be said about this for the time being. I hope that you found this interesting. If you, by chance, want to see another debrief or post-mortem of any other of the maps that I've made, let me know, and I will see about getting that made. So I'm always happy to talk about the process, and if there are people who like talking shop about Doom level design and whatnot, I'm not by any means an expert, if this map is any evidence of that. But I always feel like good discussion leads to very ripe fruit in the process. So I'm more than happy to go give this a talk or whatever. So thank you so much for tuning in and listening to me ramble for nearly an hour, if you made it through this far. I will be back in the next video, probably another user or third-party map that I find on the Doom World forums. But until that day happens, I hope you take care. Bye for now.